Okay, we are starting chapter 5B, which is about a lot of different types of transformations and understanding congruence. So let's get started. Okay, section 5 is about congruence, and we talked about congruence a little bit in the last chapter, 5A. So congruent means same shape and size. So congruent polygons are polygons that are the same shape and size. We use what's called a rigid motion to map one congruent polygon to the other. Okay, so a rigid motion, rigid means it's not flexible, it stays the same, right? So a rigid motion means it's going to stay the same shape, exactly same shape and size from one movement to the other. So our different types of rigid motions, we have a translation, which another word for a translation is a slide. We have a reflection, okay? A reflection is another word for flip. And then we have a rotation, which is another word for a turn. And we're going to be studying these in section 5-6. Okay, so today we just really want to talk about all the vocabulary associated with congruence. So I'm going to be using a lot of highlighting today. It says all congruent polygons have corresponding parts. They have corresponding angles and they have corresponding sides. The corresponding parts are located in the same places in our congruence statement. So the order of the letters in a congruence statement is very important. Okay, so for example here, you're going to see triangle ABC is congruent, that's what that symbol means, to triangle DEF. Okay, so let me put this here. This means congruent. Okay, so first of all, the letter A is the first letter here, and D is the first letter here. So A is going to correspond with D. Okay, and you can actually see that in the picture here. We have a triple arc mark here and a triple arc mark there. That means those angles are the same measure, which also means congruent. Okay, the next letters we have are B and E. So that means part B is going to correspond with E over here. And again, I can see those two angles are congruent because of the single arc mark in the picture. Okay, and then finally, letter C is last, which is going to correspond with letter F in the other one. They're both last. Okay, so the order of the letters is very important with helping us match them up. The reason why is because they aren't always side by side like this, like a translation. Sometimes they're rotated or flipped, right? And it's hard to understand which part corresponds with which. So a congruent statement is really going to help us out. Okay, here it says write a congruent statement for the triangles. Identify all pairs of congruent corresponding parts. So, okay, if I take a look here, I'm going to wait on the congruent statement for a little bit. So angle M, if I look here, angle M has two arc marks on it, right? So the two arc marks here is going to correspond with the two arc marks here. So angle M is going to be congruent to angle Y, okay? Angle N has 1, 2, 3 arc marks on it, and here angle X has 3 arc marks. So those are congruent. Okay, angle P has 1 arc mark, and angle Z also has 1. Okay, so I can actually write my congruent statement now. So I'm going to just name one of them. So just to name a triangle, you just name the 3 letters in any order. So I'm just going to call this triangle MNP. Now with triangles, please make sure to put the triangle symbol in front. And then we're going to say it's congruent to triangle. So now the M is first, and the M is congruent to the Y. So in the other triangle, we need to write the Y first. Okay, the N is the middle letter, and the N corresponds with the X. So I'm going to put the X next. And then the P is the last letter, and P corresponds with the Z. So I'm going to write the Z here. Okay, that's my congruent statement. Now, as far as the sides go, MN, here MN has 1 arc mark, and here Y and X have 1 arc mark. And it is important to even list these in the correct order. So if I look up at my congruent statement, MN are the first 2 letters. The first 2 letters here in that order are YX. So those segments are congruent, which means they're the same length. Okay, MP, here M and P are the first and last letters. First and last letters here are Y and Z. Okay, and here I am putting the segment symbol on top. Segment MP is congruent to segment YZ. Okay, we can't say that segments are equal. We can only say that their lengths are equal. So when we're talking about the segments themselves, we have to say congruent. Okay, segment NP, NP are the last two letters here, and XZ are the last two letters there. So segment NP is congruent to segment XZ. Okay, so that's how a congruent statement can really help you out. Okay, so in these situations here, we're going to have congruent figures. Okay, so it says find the measure of angle P. So here's angle P, and what I see is here we have a 90-degree angle and a 90-degree angle, right? And I have this angle is congruent to this angle. So that means that since we have congruent corresponding parts, angle B is actually going to be congruent to angle P. So the measure of angle P is going to be the same as the measure of angle B. And how would I get that? Okay, so if I ignore this altogether and I just look at this triangle, remember that all the angles in a triangle add up to 180. So I can just take 180 minus the 52 and minus the 90, okay, and that's going to end up being 38 degrees. Okay, so both of these angles are going to be 38 degrees. Okay, the next one says write a congruent statement for the triangles below. So when I write the congruent statement, I'm just going to start with the first triangle and name it however you want. You can call it triangle ABC, you can call it triangle CBA, CAB. It doesn't matter what order you put it in. Okay, so a congruent statement is going to have a congruent symbol in it, and then I'm going to write triangle. Now, the A is first, and A is 40 degrees. What's the 40-degree angle here? It's D. So D has to go first in the second part of the statement. Okay, next is the letter B. B is marked with a 90-degree angle, and E is marked with a 90-degree angle. So B and E are corresponding. Okay, and then finally I have angle C. C is 50 degrees, and here F is 50 degrees as well. So therefore we will write C and F in corresponding parts. Okay, in this diagram it says DEFG is congruent to QMNP. Now if it only has 4 letters, we don't have a symbol for quadrilateral, we just see if it has 4 letters, it's going to have 4 sides. So quadrilateral DEFG is the same in size and shape to QMNP. Find the values of X and Y. Okay, so first of all, X is an angle measure, right? X is part of an angle measure, and X is also part of a side length. But if I look here, it's got X and Y in it, and I really can't work with that, okay? So I'm going to start by ignoring this. Let's look at this side. MQ is X minus 2. Okay, so MQ, if I look up in the congruent statement to see what side that corresponds to, M and Q are the first 2 letters here. So the first 2 letters over here are D and E. So that tells me that MQ and DE have to be the same. Okay, so I'm going to start by writing X minus 2 equals 8. And now I'm going to go ahead and solve that equation. So I'm going to start by adding 2 to both sides, and I would have X equals 10. Okay, that's my first answer. Okay, now I have to solve for Y. The only place I see Y is up here in angle P. Okay, P is the last letter in the congruent statement, and G is the last letter in the congruent statement. So angle P is going to be the same as angle G. So I can write another equation that this equals that. So I'm going to write 3x plus 2y equals 84. Okay, now you might know it's impossible to solve one equation with 2 variables in it. So since I know what x is, I'm going to substitute that in here. Okay, so I'm going to write 3 times x, but instead of x, I'm going to write 10. So 3 times 10 plus 2y is equal to 84. Okay, now I'm going to simplify that. So 3 times 10 is 30 plus 2y equals 84. Okay, now this is a two-step equation, and I want to get y by itself. So the first thing to do is always add or subtract the number that's all by itself. So minus the 30 here and here, and I will have 2y equals 54. And then to solve for y, I'm going to divide by 2. And I will be left with y equals 27. And there's that one. Okay, so if you encounter a problem like this where there's 2 unknowns, start somewhere else first to figure out the one that you can figure out. Okay, the next one says quadrilateral ABCD is congruent to quadrilateral YZWX. Find the value of each variable. So here we have a bunch of them, right? M, N, K, H, S, J. There's a lot of them. All right, so first of all, I'm going to start with, let's start with M. M seems pretty easy to start with. All right, here's M. Now, if I look up here in the statement, M is on segment WZ. Okay, WZ are the middle 2 letters here. So the middle 2 letters over here are BC. So that tells me that those are the same. So first of all, M equals 4. There's one that is done. Okay, now let's find another side. How about K? All right, so K, I'm going to use a yellow marker here. K is on side ZY. If I look up here, Z and Y are the first 2 letters. First 2 letters over here are AB, so those are equal in length. All right, so for the next one, I'm going to have 3K is equal to 12. So I just need to solve that. So to solve this one for K, I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides. And I'll have K equals 4. Okay, let's just keep going around. So the next one I'm going to have is the J plus 1. Okay, J plus 1 is on side XY. X and Y are the first and the last letters here. Over here, the first and the last letters are A and D. So those 2 sides are the same length. So I can write the equation J plus 1 equals 10. We can solve that by subtracting 1 on both sides. We'll have J equals 9. Okay, last side we're going to have must be these 2 that are corresponding. So that means H minus 7 is going to equal 15. Right, to get H by itself, I'm going to add 7 to both sides. And that's going to give me H equals 22. All right, so there is everything having to do with the sides. Now I need to find the variables of the 4 angles. Okay, so these aren't probably as tough as they are going to seem. I'm going to start with R. R seems really easy because there's nothing else but R. So R is in the same place as angle X. So X in the statement is the last letter, and the last letter here is D. So X and D are the same. Okay, so R should equal 71. Okay, so next I'm going to move on to the T. T is at angle Y. Y is the first letter. The first letter here is A, so Y and A are the same. So that means T has to equal 87. Okay, next, moving around, I'm going to do this one, 180 minus S. That is angle Z. Z is the second letter here. The second letter here is B. So B and Z are the same. So I can write an equation, 180 minus S equals 112. All right. So for this one, to get S by itself, first I have to move the 180. It's positive be careful. The minus S, the minus goes with the S, not with the 180. So 180 is positive. To get rid of it, I have to subtract it. Okay, now be careful. That negative or minus is going to come down with the S. So it's really negative S. And then 112 minus 180 is going to be a negative 62. Okay, so now there's a couple ways to think about how to solve for S and get rid of the negative. One way, easy, is just to say, hey, this means the opposite of S equals negative 62. So the opposite of S is negative 62, so that means S would have to equal positive 62. Another way to think about this is to say that's the same as negative 1 times S, that we could divide by negative 1 on both sides. And that would give us S equals positive 62. Okay, that leaves us with the last one. 2N is in angle W. W is the third letter. Third letter here is C. So these two are the same, W and C. Of course, this means a 90-degree angle. So I'm going to write 2N equals 90. And to solve this one for N, I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides. And that's going to give me N equals 45. Okay, that was a very long problem, but I was able to figure out all of them by using the congruence statement. All right, let me know if you have any questions about corresponding parts using a congruence statement.